The Memphis Grizzlies didn't get a win on Thursday. A 118-103 loss to the Minnesota Timberwolves. We're going to talk about a little bit of that, but I also got a special guest for y'all today. We got a special guest. Rafael Barlowe is here to talk NBA draft prospects, in particular, G.G. Jackson. Everybody's want to talk about G.G., what he's done lately for the Memphis Grizzlies. We got the right man who's kind of projected what G.G. Jackson can be a lot longer than many of you. So we're going to talk about that coming up right here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Joined again, as I said in the opening, by Rafael Barlowe. This is the man when it comes to scouting in the NBA. Very happy to have him on the show, the director of scouting at NBA Big Board. He's also the host of Locked On NBA Draft. So you know, the Grizzlies might have a high draft pick later on this season. So you just head over to Locked On NBA Draft, and this is the man who can break it all down for you. But Rafael, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk basketball, especially for like the Grizzlies fans. I know basketball is huge in the Bluff City.
Man, it's huge. It's huge. Basketball is what we eat, sleep, live all day. When you look at those ratings from the NBA Finals, pretty much every year Memphis is all the way in the top, is in the top 5, top 10, and you know the Grizzlies aren't usually in the finals. Like this is just a basketball city all around. But we got Rafael here today, and also everyone. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Remember that this is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use the code in all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. Now let's talk some basketball. The Grizzlies, as we said, we'll start the show off talking about the loss on last night against the Timberwolves. Strong start for Memphis overall. But they lost 118-103. Jaren Jackson Jr., 36 points in his performance, harmed by foul trouble, pretty much limited. And basically what we saw was pretty much how this season is going to play out for the most part with the Grizzlies. Jaren Jackson Jr. is carrying a heavy load. He went out the game. Third quarter, I thought the Grizzlies looked strong. Luke Kennard, 15 points in the third quarter. I think he knocked down 4 triples in that stretch. And then in the fourth quarter, it just wasn't sustainable. The Grizzlies were able to survive when Jaren picked up his 4th foul, in the third quarter. But when he picked up his 5th foul early in the fourth quarter, Mike Conley, former Grizzlies here for 12 years and a legend in Memphis, big fourth quarter, 8-0 run. Anthony Edwards, 26 points in the second half. And that's just too much for this team that's playing without Desmond Bane, playing without Ja Morant, playing without all these offensive weapons. But since we got Rafael in the building here, I gotta ask you a question that a lot of Grizzlies fans are kind of settled in about here, and this is the thing: the Grizzlies now, as the roster is currently constructed, and especially in this game against the Timberwolves, we just mentioned how dominant Jaren Jackson Jr. was. 36 points for Jaren Jackson Jr. But this is the problem, I think, with the Grizzlies right now. David Roddy, first-round pick, a couple years ago, 8 points off the bench. Santi Aldama provided 13 points, but shot 5 of 14 from the field. Another former first-round pick, who you can argue getting late in first round, that's probably a hit. But David Roddy, Ziz Williams is the big one. Ziz Williams, 2 points off the bench in 12 minutes, 1 of 5 shooting. And I want to talk to you a little bit about Ziz Williams in particular, because just to be honest with you, a lot of Grizzlies fans have kind of given up at this point. They've tried at the beginning of the season to hold on to the hope. Ziz Williams said before the season that no one has worked harder than me in the offseason. And what we saw is he went out in the preseason, won the starting job at the beginning of the season, and now you see he's playing 12 minutes. Going back through the draft process, when you evaluated Ziz Williams And when you look back to from then to what he's become now, are you surprised at his development? At this point, is this kind of on par for what you thought he would be? Like, what's kind of your sense of Ziz Williams, who was a 5-star going into Stanford? Played high caliber basketball in high school, and became a top 10 pick for the Grizzlies, but he hasn't quite put it together yet.
Yeah, I don't know how to say this without sounding like a hater or I told you so.
Yeah,
Zaire was a tough eval for me coming out of Stanford because I thought he went, where'd he go, 10? Was he
yeah,
a
he went
10th
10.
pick?
Mm-hmm.
I thought he went 10th strictly on his high school resume because at Stanford he wasn't good, to be honest with you. He shot like 37% from the floor, 29% from three. And I remember talking to different people that were really high on him, and they mentioned, oh, it was the COVID year,
Yeah,
Stanford. They, because of the strict COVID rules in California, Stanford was practicing without a home. And then I think he got into an accident riding a bike or something like that before the season started. He had this big bulky knee brace,
yep,
and so
yep,
it was kind of like all the inefficient numbers and his honestly his poor play. It was like it was an asterisk by it because they had so many different excuses. And so for me, it got to the point where I was like, you know what? Okay, maybe I'm being too hard on him. Maybe I'm missing it because everybody was high on him, but I
yeah,
wasn't. And then I started to turn the corner. But the lesson I learned from that, which it kind of relates to Gigi in a sense, is just stick to your guns. Like if there's
mhm,
something that you believe, I mean, it's okay to be wrong because I mean the NBA teams get it wrong, and so I'm not shocked at all because
yeah,
I thought that his high school resume propelled him into a top 10 pick, not what he did on the college level. If you go up based off of what he did in college, then I don't think he would have went that high. But we've also seen guys that, Peyton Watson, for example, only
yeah,
averaged like 3 points per game and he's playing well. So this is what makes the draft so intriguing for me. And it's such a hit or miss. Like I
hmm
mean, you just have to project and hope you get it right.
yeah, exactly. You project and you hope you get it right. And that draft in particular, I tell you what, a lot of people in the Grizzlies lore, like look at Trey Murphy over there, and he went with the Grizzlies' original pick, and every time he knocks down those 3-pointers against the Grizzlies, they kind of look at it, as man, that could have been, he could have been the guy playing alongside of Ja and Dez and whatnot. But uh, since we're
Who?
stuck,
That would be a dangerous lineup.
man, that's the one that kind of the one that got away. But so you look at the rest of this Grizzlies young car. I want to kind of just give you the floor a little bit. See if anyone. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about a lot about Gigi Jackson going forward in the show. But the Grizzlies have a lot of young guys right now, and we're still trying to figure out who's part of this team long term. We know Vince Williams Jr. just earned a full contract. He actually had a good start yesterday against Anthony Edwards, held him 2 points in the first half. Then Anthony Edwards got a little bit more aggressive and, scored 26 in the second half. But you got Vince Williams Jr., you mentioned Santi Aldama a little bit earlier. David Roddy and Jake LaRavia were the first-round picks a couple years ago. They're both, in a sense, have kind of been underwhelming. What is your thoughts on the rest of the Grizzlies young core? I mean, you still can include Ja, Dez, and Jaren in there, but we know those guys are kind of set in stone. But that
Yeah.
second tier Grizzlies young core players, what are your thoughts on those guys? Anyone in particular?
Well, one, this is the opportunity for them to figure it out. Like this is
Mhm.
a trial run in a sense for next year because the wings are for the most part they're I mean outside of Jake they're healthy, they're playing, and so I think it's going to be a situation where whoever plays well the last 40 something games of the season, I think they can feel good about being on the roster next year. But they're all in like this weird situation in a sense because they're first round picks. So usually with a first round pick, you want to give them the opportunity to develop. But I don't know too many teams where they have multiple guys that were first round picks in recent drafts that all play like the same position. They have different games, but they're all fighting for like the same position or spot on the roster as a 3 and a 4. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned those guys fighting for those spots at the 3 and the 4, and there's one guy in particular. I know Grizzlies fans are going to be real excited about these next couple segments we're talking about. We got to talk about GG Jackson, who didn't have the greatest of games against the Timberwolves, but I think that's perfect. That lines up exactly with what we're about to talk about here. But again, Rafael Barlowe was someone who really dived in on the GG Jackson tape ahead of the draft. We're going to talk about that coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Because look, eBay Motors is the place you go to make your parts fit. See, look, our guy Josh Lloyd over there has picked out the picks of the weeks on eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And guess what? One guy who he has listed on there is GG Jackson. Look, Memphis needs some shot creation right now, and GG Jackson is one of those guys who could do it. He just had a down game, but he's shown the flashes. He should be someone that managers can look at to grab out as Memphis continues to use him a little bit more. There are a couple other guys out there. How about Marvin Bagley, right? Just got the start over there with Daniel Gafford out right now. Had a big double-double for the Washington Wizards. They lost against the Knicks, but that's another guy that you should look at out there as you look to grab players. These are the fantasy picks of the week. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you with your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. And guess what? It's the same way with your car. I always go back to my 2001 Honda Accord when I talk about this. I needed a certain part. I needed a certain part on my car, and eBay Motors was right there when I needed my alternator to be fixed my junior year of college. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride-or-die vehicle, you can make sure everything runs smoothly too. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or you just can get your money back. And plus, look, at these prices, it's easy, man. It's easy. So keep your ride-or-die vehicle alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items apply, and exclusions apply as well. Coming up on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk GG Jackson and his outlook with the Grizzlies, so stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I am Damichael Cole, beat writer for Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee, joined by Rafael Barlowe, the head of scouting at NBA Big Board, as well as the host of the Lock On NBA Draft podcast. So make sure you go check out his content in those places as well. But I had to bring Rafael on today, and here's the thing. I remember, I think it's been a little bit, it was some months ago, but Rafael, I remember seeing you were someone I saw that said if GG Jackson was in the 2024 NBA draft class, this upcoming draft class here in June, that he would be one of the top picks or potentially even the top pick in that draft class. And we talked a little bit about this recently, and you basically doubled down on that. What makes GG Jackson, in your mind, such a tantalizing prospect, for the Memphis Grizzlies going forward?
Yeah, I've been a fan since the first time I saw him play. He's 6'9",
yeah.
And even though he's played well in the minutes that he's received with the Grizzlies, except tonight. Tonight was it was a rough game against the Wolves, but he's a 6'9", 3'4" that is a excellent ball handler. And I don't think Grizzlies fans have really had the opportunity to see him create his own shot off the dribble. He's kind of been limited to spotting up in the corner. He's been hot from three.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's sustainable, even though I think he's a good shooter, but his real strength has been able to create off the dribble, get to his pull-up, and create mismatches with his size and his ball handling and his offensive creativity. And I really lean towards guys that can get their own shot. I'm a big fan of shot makers. And so that's what really intrigued me about GG when I first saw him play when he was in high school.
Yeah. And because the question everyone keeps going back to is, how did this guy fall to 45 in the draft? if you look at the Gigi Jackson profile, like, yes, we know this guy was the number one ranked player in this class. I think it was class of 2023 coming out of high school initially. He committed to North Carolina, and he decided to reclassify. So I don't think we talked about the story here on Locked On Grizzlies, but a couple days ago, when the Grizzlies played the Warriors, after the game, he and Stephen Curry, had a little conversation, and that conversation was centered around Gigi Jackson being uninvited, quote unquote, uninvited to the Under Armour camp because he reclassified. And, Steph Curry's camp was, I guess they needed those invites for the class of 2023 kids. So I guess he used that as motivation in that, that 20 plus point performance that he had against the Warriors. But what I want to get back to now is Gigi Jackson before the NBA, because that's the question everyone has. Like, how did he fall to 45 if he was a number one pick, a projected number one pick, number one overall recruit in his class? He played for Team USA, was one of the best players, on the Team USA under 17, under 18 team. Why do you think GMs allowed him to fall to the 45th pick to the Grizzlies?
That's the $1 million question. I don't know. I mean, like, Ray Charles could see the talent. Like, he's so talented. He's so gifted. He was ranked highly for a reason. I mean, even as a freshman at South Carolina, he put up good numbers. The game that stands out to me was the game against Alabama, where he went heads up with Brandon Miller. They both had strong performances. And even though they were both freshmen last year, Brandon Miller was at least 18 to 24 months older than Gigi. I mean, Gigi's the youngest player in the NBA right now. So the way I saw it is like, all right, if a team selects him high, and I'm on record of saying I would have taken him in the top 5 in 2023. I mean, he's 2 years younger than the Thompson twins. And so if you look at it from that perspective, imagine what Gigi would have looked like if he were a 20-year-old freshman in college basketball. He started off the season at 17. And in this era of guys reclassifying, I mean, there's like some juniors that are 17 years old.
Yeah.
And Gigi was playing some SEC games. Well, he turned 18 in December, so it may have been one or two, but he played some big schools as a 17-year-old. So projecting like long term and seeing like what he was doing and the success he had at such a young age, I think it would have been easy to project, all right, where is he going to be when he's 20? Because when he's 20, he'll be in what, year 2?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is a familiar position for Grizzlies because Jaren Jackson Jr., you remember when he was drafted, he was one of the youngest players in his draft class at the time. I think he had a September birthday, but he was one of the youngest players in his draft class. And we see now Jaren Jackson Jr. is still only 24 years old, and people, get surprised by that. But that's because, he was so young. And so that's kind of what we're seeing a little bit, and we're probably going to see with Gigi. He just turned 19, in mid-December and whatnot. So the last question here, kind of as we reflect on what he was before we get to the future, how much stock did you put into, and I mean, we have a clue since you had him top 5, on your board, but how much stock did you put into the year he had at South Carolina? The numbers weren't great from an efficiency standpoint and whatnot. He was scoring the basketball there, but as compared to, again, what we saw in high school and then the 1 year at South Carolina, how did you kind of evaluate those two things as you put together, his projection for the NBA?
Yeah, I thought it was risky in a sense for him to go to South Carolina. If he goes to North Carolina where he originally committed, the sample size is a lot smaller. He's playing a role on the team that they went to the Final Four the year before. Yep. So he's not going to be featured with Caleb Love and Armando Bacot and those guys. He goes to South Carolina, is pretty much given the keys to the team. And it's weird because even though the numbers weren't efficient and South Carolina was losing, it was actually held against him. And as a person that eats, sleeps, and breathes the NBA draft, I'm looking at this G League Ignite team right now. They have 2 guys that some people think could be top 5 picks.
Right.
And they've lost like 9 or 10 games in a row. and it's not being held against them like they'll hold it against a college kid. And of course, people say, well, the G League is tougher than college. Okay, that's fair, but it was held against a 17-year-old who was inefficient. But it's not going to be held against guys who are playing for the Ignite, who are, and I watched the games. A lot of their points and their numbers are numbers that they've put up when the team is down by 20. I mean, they lost the game by 50 and so on. So I just think that it's just people just overthinking it in a sense. And because the numbers weren't efficient, and I mean, Gigi had some moments where teams question his maturity because of the body language and so on. But I mean, I think that's something that they're going to end up regretting down the line.
Yeah,
Passing him off, I should say.
that's the way it's looking. And the Grizzlies drafted him with the 45th pick. They've had some good luck with that pick in the past. I believe that's the same exact pick where they got Dylan Brooks in the second round, who went on to, by the end of his time in Memphis, was an all defensive player. And it was a complicated time in Memphis, but at the end of the day, he left his mark there, and he was a big part of multiple 50-win teams. So if you get, that type of production and then some from Gigi, then the future is definitely bright. And speaking of the future, we're about to talk about that as well. We just reflected on how did Gigi fall into the lap of the Grizzlies. And we got to talk about the future outlook of this 19-year-old prospect for Memphis. Before we get to that, we got to talk about another sponsor for today's episode, and that is PrizePicks. Look, PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And look, it's simple. It's you and the numbers. You don't got to worry about other people. It's just you and the numbers. You pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And guess what? The money's going to just start coming your way. It's all that simple. And look, with the basketball season here, you can do combo projections and combo projections across multiple sports. You can do football and basketball specials. You can do something like Travis Kelce at 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made and receptions with a player like LeBron James. You could do something like that. I saw PrizePicks put up a combination recently where you could do LeBron James and Bronny James points together. So go check all of that out at PrizePicks. And one of my favorite things about PrizePicks is PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For the football fans out there, we know a lot of football injuries happen early in games. And if you have a player who exits the game in the first half, or in basketball if he exits in the first half as well, that player can be rebooted. And PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with the injury insurance policy. So make sure you go check that out at prizepicks.com. All you got to do is go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnba. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks is the only place you can take advantage of those type of opportunities. Coming up next on Locked On Grizzlies, we got to talk about the long-term outlook of G.G. Jackson. He is one of the most tantalizing prospects on the Grizzlies. So let's get into that right here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. Recapping the show so far, we talked about the Grizzlies and Timberwolves in that game. Jaren Jackson Jr. shined for Memphis, but didn't get too much help. Luke Kennard had a good third quarter. Jaren also was limited by foul trouble and whatnot. And we talked about G.G. Jackson in the second segment. How did he get to the Grizzlies at 45? Remember, the Memphis Grizzlies traded their first-round pick. G.G. Jackson was their only pick up in the draft until that point. He's the only player. He's the only rookie on the team right now for the Memphis Grizzlies. So now the question is, what happens from here? If you look at the contract situation, G.G. Jackson is on a 2-way contract. Breaking news, that's not going to last too much longer. Like if he stays on this contract, he'll be a restricted free agent after the season. We know how all that plays out. Memphis is going to take care of this kid, going to take care of this situation eventually. But the next question is, how does he project around this team? You look at this team right now, you got John Morant, you got Desmond Bane, you got Jaren Jackson Jr., Vince Williams just got elevated from a 2-way deal. And then you got those veterans, right? You got the Brandon Clarks, who's about to enter, his second contract with the Grizzlies. Steven Adams will be on the final year of his deal, but we know when healthy, the impact that he can have on the team. Luke Kennard, so much more around this team. But there is a place for what G.G. Jackson brings, as Rafael alluded to earlier. The shot creation is very plus. And if you look at all those guys that I just mentioned on the Grizzlies, outside of Ja Morant and Desmond Bane as of recently, remember last season, Desmond Bane was not an efficient isolation scorer. This year he got a little bit better. But G.G. Jackson gives Memphis something that they need. But the question is, how does he fit into this team long-term, and just what is his long-term position? And that's why we got Rafael on the show today to talk about that. So, Rafael, you mentioned the shot creation and the size and all of those, those, I guess, the tools that he possesses. What's your take on, like, how long do you think it takes someone, of G.G.'s stature, his caliber, his skill set to kind of put those things together from a projection standpoint? Like, what do you see him becoming?
I'm a little bit biased, so I'm probably not the best person to ask this question because I've been on record saying I would have taken him top 5 in last year and number 1 in 2024 if he stayed in his original class. I think that he could be, down the line, I think he could be a very, very valuable piece simply because the Grizzlies have, they got their main guys. They got their dudes. You got Ja, you got Bane, you have Jaren Jackson Jr. Yeah. I think they may need like another shot maker, a guy that can, make something happen late in the shot clock, which I think that's going to be Gigi's role long term. But in order for him to get to that role, he's going to have to knock down open shots and be able to play as a floor spacer, which in theory is really not his greatest strength. And so I think it's a good sign in a sense that he has been able to scale down his game. I think one of the knocks and concerns that people had about him was he had such a high usage and he played such a ball dominant, quote unquote, ball dominant role at South Carolina that a lot of people that were like not as high on him thought, oh yeah, well, his game doesn't translate to playing in a reduced role. Well, we didn't get a chance to see him play in a reduced role. So I think he's slowly, it's a small sample size, but I think he's slowly proving that theory wrong. And so with all that being said, if he can knock down open shots and play a complementary role, then I think as he gets stronger and develops, then you're going to be able to see everything that he can do. So I think he can be a big part of the Grizzlies' future. I look at Memphis as like a smart franchise. They've had some wins. You went back to Dillon Brooks. I've jokingly said like they were able to get Dillon Brooks, a starter, a very, a high level starter on a 50-win team for like a Snickers and a Coke. I don't even remember what the Rockets traded him for on draft night, but it was definitely a very lopsided deal. And so, I do think that Gigi will be a big part of Memphis's future. He just has to be a star in the complementary role when everybody's healthy.
Yeah, and to go off of that point, we were in the locker room joking after, I think it was the Warriors game where I was messing with him about swinging the ball. His teammates have gotten on him in the past. They say, oh, sometimes when the ball gets to Gigi, it's not coming back after that. But that was kind of the summer league talk, when we were out in Vegas and whatnot. And if you watch him in the G League, and see, he started to make the extra pass a little bit more. He started to see things a little bit better. And now you see in the role kind of with the Grizzlies. And I think that's kind of why he's going to have games like he did against the Timberwolves. And then he has a game like he did against the Warriors where he makes 5 of 8 3-pointers. And then the next game against the Timberwolves, he doesn't really score as much because, again, like you said, he's going to have to grow into that role where he's the guy who says, everybody get out of the way, and it's 6 seconds on the shot clock, and he goes and gets you a bucket. But from a fit perspective, how do you like Memphis, for him? Do you think, this situation is better than, for example, him going to a Detroit and playing 25 to 30 minutes consistently, or, Washington or whatever the case may be? How do you like the fit in Memphis where he goes down, plays, on a two-way contract? He's playing with the Memphis Hustle down in the G League. Now he's getting a little bit, time with the Grizzlies. How do you think that situation kind of helps or even hampers, whatever your opinion is, of GG Jackson going forward?
It's kind of hard to go against what happened, because I think
Mhm.
when it's all said and done by the end of the year, he could end up in a better situation than guys that went in the lottery. I mean, you look at Jarris Walker. I don't even think there's a clear path for him to get playing time. Jet Howard in Orlando is playing in the
Yep.
G League. So it just really all worked out, which didn't seem like it was even possible just 3 weeks ago. And when he first went to Memphis, obviously I thought, dang, they got to steal, but it's going to be tough for him to get some playing time.
Yeah.
But I thought like it can be used as a redshirt year for the Grizzlies. Like you have him play with the hustle the whole season. And if I were like totally in charge of his development from the Grizzlies standpoint, I would have told him to spend that season in the hustle, work on, playing off the ball, but I would have had him like focus on being a playmaker, making plays for others, putting him in some pick and roll situations, because he has the ball handling to make it happen. And there's not really like a lot of pressure to like win on the G League level. So it's supposed to be about developing. So that would have been like my game plan for him, because I would have thought he would have been more valuable weapon down the line if he, was, just being able to make plays for others and so on and knock down shots. And so with all that being said, the situation in Memphis is going to work out perfect. I mean, it's unfortunate for the guys that were like ahead of him on the depth chart and so on. But I mean, you just look out at the path that was cleared out for him due to injuries, and now he has an opportunity to, one, get his contract converted. He has an opportunity to basically a trial run for next year to be in their rotation. And if he plays well, I mean, it's going to be a winning situation. And, fit is everything. And like I mentioned, you look at Asor Thompson, who went, fifth. I think he's an absolutely terrible fit in Detroit, because in my opinion, he's best with the ball in his hand. And in Detroit, he's not going to have the ball in his hands. Shooting is his biggest weakness. And in Detroit, it's like they're putting him in the corner, which is making, teams not guard him and triple K. So fit is important. And I think it's amazing how it turned out, but Gigi's in a situation where he's going to get playing time. And I think fit is going to be good for him, because he's going to have a role where he doesn't have to be the guy. If he can just knock down open shots, it's going to open up everything for him. And if he can knock down open shots, then you're going to be able to see everything that he can do. So I think the future is bright, and I think that the fit for him in Memphis is great, even though it didn't look like it just maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the future is definitely bright for GG. Rafael, before we let you go, let's play a little quick game real quick. Let's call it buy or sell. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna throw 3 quick things at you, and you regarding GG Jackson, and you just tell me if you buy it or if you're selling it, and you can briefly explain why, if you want to in the process. So let's get that cooking real quick. So GG Jackson long term will be a 4 over a 3. You buy or sell him?
I think, closing games, the closing lineup is more important than the starting lineup. And so I think when you close games, he'll close at the 4, where I think that he'll have some advantages there. But I also think you can play him at the 3 once he gets stronger and be able to post up. So I think he'll have some advantages at either spot. But I would lean towards him being a 4 in a closing lineup.
Gotcha. Right now, defense is where GG Jackson, according to the Grizzlies, needs to grow the most. GG Jackson will become an above average defender in the NBA. Buying or selling?
I'm buying it. It's totally up to him. I mean, he has the physical tools to be a really good defender. But, sometimes when a guy is so gifted on the offensive end, that's where he's going to put most of his focus and his energy. But I think he has the tools, and I think he could end up in a situation where he's going to have to defend in order to get playing time. Mm-hmm. And so I will say that he'll be a plus defender.
That's a good point. Taylor Jenkins is all defense, and people wonder why guys like Zaire and David Roddy and those guys get on the floor over some of the offensive options on the Grizzlies. John Conchar. It's because Taylor Jenkins really values defense. Last one. Put you on the spot a little bit on this one. This is a little bit tougher. GG Jackson, By the time he is 22 years old, he could be averaging 18 points per game, buying or selling.
Oh, that's tough because I think it's going to totally depend on who's on the roster at the time. I mean, things can change really fast. I do think that he is going to be an 18 point per game scorer at some point in his career, within the first 5 years. I'm going to say no, simply because I think that it's hard to be score 18 points per game as like the fourth option on a really
Yeah,
good team. And
for
so
sure.
I expect Ja and Bane and Triple J to be on the roster for a while. So I think he's going to have to be at best a fourth option early in his career. But then again, he's 19, 22, so long from now.
Yeah,
You got to think how fast things change in the NBA. But yeah, I'm going to sell on that one just because
yeah.
I think the Memphis core is going to be together for a while.
Yeah, good point. The Memphis core definitely. John Morant is just starting his second contract, so he's under contract for the next 5 years. Desmond Bane's second contract kicks in next season, so he's under contract, including this season, for the next 6 years. And then Jaren Jackson Jr. has a couple years left on his deal, but we know the extension talks will start cranking up very soon on that
Yeah.
end. So, very good point there.
What's crazy about that? I just want to add something that if Gigi plays too well too early, then he's probably not able to stay in Memphis because they won't be able
Mm.
to afford him.
That remind you, I call that the Joe Johnson. Yeah, that's kind of when Joe Johnson early in his career. I think he was in Phoenix. James
Phoenix.
Harden is another example. When he's
Gilbert
6'1",
Arenas.
Gilbert Arenas in Golden State before he ended up playing with the Wizards. All good examples where too young, too good, too soon, and that could happen. That potentially could happen as Memphis gets into the luxury tax next season. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts on Locked On. Look, Locked On Sports Today is where you need to go to check out extra Locked On national coverage, because at the end of the day, it's the only 24/7 first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe. It's the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Rafael, we want to thank you, man, for joining us today on Locked On Grizzlies. I said it at the top of the show, but I want to make sure I give you the floor. Let everyone know where they can go check out all of your work, because the Grizzlies fans are going to be tuned in this year, man. This is potentially a lottery pick type year. Where can Grizzlies fans stay in tune with all your work?
Yeah, you can find me on. First of all, I'm on the Locked On Network, and thank you for having me on. But I am the host of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, and it's weird because every year it's like a fan base that tunes in, and I was not expecting the Memphis Grizzlies fan base to have any interest in the draft and the lottery this year. But yeah, I mean it's 5 days a week, cover the draft. I have 3 other co-hosts, and then I have a newsletter, NBABigBoard.com. It is a subscription-based newsletter, and I charge a subscription, but I write big boards, articles with intel from scouts, and I use the money from the subscription to travel, and a lot of it overseas and internationally. And I tell people all the time, I saw Aldama play in 2019 when he won the MVP of the U18s.
Yeah.
So I've been tracking him for a while. And so he actually won it over Alprince Sengun. So,
wow.
So I love to travel internationally, and obviously I keep it with the guys in the States, but that's where the subscription income goes, is to my traveling and scouting as an independent scout.
Yeah, for sure. So Grizzlies fans, you heard it here first. This is the man to check out all your draft coverage this year, and we're gonna have him on Locked On Grizzlies a little bit later in the year as well, as we get into that point, as we start breaking down all our draft coverage of this team. But Rafael, thank you for joining us again. Grizzlies fans, make sure you tuned in with us on next week as we're going to break down all the games. The Grizzlies now are in the stretch of 7 games in the next 13 days. So a lot of game coverage coming forward here on Locked On Grizzlies. But thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies today. Remember, you can continue to watch us everywhere you get your podcasts, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen, wherever you watch, Locked On Grizzlies is there. And remember, we're free and available wherever you get those podcasts. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.